The Sikha we will be learning now is for Parshas Ki Savo, but actually it's a Sikha in Parshas Ki Teizei. So look at the Sikha, Chelik Havdalah, the second Sikha for Parshas Ki Teizei. If in Posek is Sibne Bayis Chodosh, Vasisa Michael Agecha, and the Posek where the Torah says, when you will build a new home, you shall make a fence on your roof. State in Sifri, so it says in Sifri that when it says Bayis, the word Bayis, Lerabes Heichel, it comes to include, to add even the Heichel. The Heichel is the building of the Beis Hamikdash. We know that the Beis Hamikdash was made of many sections. There was the outside sections, which was the Azorah. In the middle of the Azorah, there was the building. The building was made up of three sections. One part, the beginning, was the Ulam, which was basically a hallway, which was more or less empty. Then after that is the Heichel, which had the Menorah and the Shulchan, and it had a small Mizbeach. And behind that was another room, and that was the Kodesh HaKadoshim, where the Oren was. Now, in truth, all three are called Heichel, and that's a building. So the Sifri says that when it says Kisim the Bayis, it says you build a house, you have to make a fence. It includes the Heichel, the building of the Beis Hamikdash. On top of the building, on the roof, you need to make a fence. Now, the truth is there was a fence there anyway. We know when we look in the Rambam, when we see the whole structure of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a building, first floor, and second floor, then was a roof, and on top of the roof there was a fence. But what the Sifri is saying, the Rebbe explains, as the Maike from Gag from Heichel Hamikdash, that there was a Maike, that there was a fence on the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Heichel of the Mikdash, is given nit nor l'nei. It wasn't only for decoration, because some would say that this is only for decoration, like other parts there were for decoration. So from the Sifri, we see that they're telling us it's not only because of decoration, there are other reasons, nor achiyuv. It was an obligation which was part of the mitzvah of Maike, part of the mitzvah of putting on a fence on your roof. Just like you have to put a fence on your house, a roof of your own house, the Beis Hamikdash building needed a Maike. And when they put up that fence, it was also because of this mitzvah that it needs a Maike. Is he do the shail? It's known, the question. The din is about the knisiyas, about the midrashas, and the potter from the Maike. We know that shuls or yeshivas where you learn Torah are exempt from the mitzvah of Maike, of making the fence. With the Gemara darshant, what the Gemara in Chulun says, when the postik says you shall make a Maike ligagecho to your roof, gagecho your roof. The mutter about the knisiyas about the midrashas comes to exclude shuls or yeshivas. That's not your house, your roof. And therefore they are exempt and they don't need the Maike. So the question is Favos is the Heichel HaMikdash mechuyev b'Maike. So why is the building of the Beis Hamikdash, the Heichel of the Beis Hamikdash, need a Maike? If a shul doesn't need a Maike, why would the Heichel of the Beis Hamikdash, the building of the Beis Hamikdash, need a Maike? The Ragat Shover answered of them. The Ragat Shover answers: "At the chiyuv Maike is chal v'yashteit in Sifri v'shas chidushei." This din of Maike, it says in Sifri, another place in Sifri, where it says, when it says Bayis Chodosh, a new house, and it doesn't mean a new house, only a new house, an old house. If you move into an old house, you don't need there anyway. But what does the word Bayis Chodosh mean? Mishas Chidushe. When does the obligation come? From when it is new already. Which means, like when the Bayis werd gebuit, as soon as the house is built, noch eider mehebt on in im Nutzen, before they start using it. The moment the house is built, you are obligated to make it. And the Rebbe in the Orah 10 says, that's what some of Farshim say. The Rebbe in the Hillel, Sifri, the Birav say that that's the pshat in the Sifri. There are others who say a different pshat, that opposite. When it says in Sifri that Mishas Chidushe means when you move into it, when it's new to you to live in. But that's not what the other Mefarshim say. So the simple pshat in Sifri is that the Sifri tells you that from when the house is built, you are right away obligated to make a Maike before you even move in. Since the din is by the Beis Hamikdash, that when they build it, they didn't build it and it was holy already. It wasn't a Beis Hamikdash. First you build it b'chayil. Chayil means it was regular, not holy. Then they were magdashed. Then after it was built, they were magdashed. They made it holy. It comes out as b'shas chidushay, when the chidush started, which means when the Mikdash werd gebuit, when the Beis Hamikdash was built, hat noch nit kedusha, didn't have a kedusha yet. The mail is a dan chai b'maike, and therefore you're obligated to make a maike when you built it. Since the chiyuv of maike is right away when you build it, and when you build the Beis Hamikdash in the beginning, it wasn't a Beis Hamikdash yet. The kasha was, how come by Yeshua you're exempt from making a maike? By the Mikdash, yeah. So the answer is because since the maike is obligated, the chiyuv maike is the obligation comes when it's built already, only when, even the beginning, when it's just built before you move in, when they just built the Beis Hamikdash, it wasn't a Beis Hamikdash. So by a shul, when you build it, it's a shul, so you're potter. But here, it's the obligation came there. The Mela, that's why by a Beis Hamikdash you are chayiv. But the Rebbe says that Tiritz is over tzorchi. In Godel, this Tiritz is not easy to understand. Now, before the Rebbe goes into the questions that he asks here in the Sikha, in the Ha'orah 12, he asks a main question. Neisev ale Iker, besides the main question the Rebbe says that I have, Shedina nal b'sifri dechayim mishas chedusha das yochid. This din that you're a chayiv, as the Sifri says, from when it's built before you even move in, is only an opinion of an individual. We don't paskin like that. It's not brought in the Rambam. So Mela, how could the Akashora say that this din that you have to have a maike on the Beis Hamikdash is because of this halacha that it's chayiv when it's built before it became a Beis Hamikdash? That's not the halacha. That's just an opinion. So you can't base this halacha that the Beis Hamikdash is chayiv with a maike based on that halacha, because that halacha is not really according to halacha. So that's one thing. But besides that, the Rebbe says, number one, this was about the knisiyas, about the medrashas and the potem and maike. This that the shuls and the yeshivas are exempt from the mitzvah of maike is nitfal zezayin kodesh. It's not because it's holy. In other words, like this: if the reason why a shul is poter because it's holy, so then you could say, but the Beis Hamikdash when it's built, it's not holy yet, so it doesn't have the din. So that's why it's different. But even in the shul, it's not because it's holy. Because as the drash is, it's not your roof. It's not yours. It doesn't have an owner. So there's no owner to be mechayev, to obligate him to build it. So it has nothing to do with the kedusha. If so, so the heichal of the Beis Hamikdash, the building with the Beis Hamikdash should be potter for Maike. Even though it's built b'cheil, so it doesn't have the kedusha. It doesn't become your roof. One thing is clear: when you build a Beis Hamikdash, even if you build it in a tzchayil, it doesn't mean that you're the balabos over it. There's no balabos, no individual person is a balabos. And since the shul is potter not because it's holy, the shul is potter because it's not an individual person, it's not yours. The Beis Hamikdash, when it's built, even though it's chayil, it's not kodesh, it's still not yours. So why would that make a din that the Beis Hamikdash would need a maike? You can't answer as tirutzis leitama Rambam. Can't answer that the Ragachover's teretz that the reason why a Beis Hamikdash needs a maike because when it's built, it's still chayil, goes according to the Rambam. What does the Rambam say? The Rambam says that the reason why shuls and yeshivas are exempt from maike is it's not like we said the reason before. The Rasha says because they don't belong to individuals, so it's not gagecha. The Rambam gives a different reason. It's not made for a place to live. It's not a living place, and you're only chayiv if it's a place ladira. So you could say mashenka der heichol. So that's why you could say pshat and rakachover. He goes according to the Rambam that the reason why the shuls are potter because it's not a plain dira. Mashenka der heichol was b'shas beyond is an ochel, but the heichol the Beis Hamikdash b'shas they build it, it's chel. Can the demel genutzt werden ladira? So at that point you still could use it for a living space. The father is a mechuyev b'maike. It's chayiv b'maike. See a shul you can't live in. So it's potter for Maike. See, if according to Rashi, the reason is because it doesn't have an owner. But the Rambam says a different reason. The Rambam says because you don't live there. Now the Beis Hamikdash, because since it's chayiv from when it's built, the way he brings, and when it's built, it's not holy yet, so you could live in there. So it is a Beis Dir. So you can't answer that. And the Rebbe says why. So in Ha'orah 16, the Rebbe says besides the fact that you can't say that's what the Ragachover meant because he doesn't bring this Rambam. But besides that, the Rebbe says you can't say that's the teretz. Even though when they build the Beis Hamikdash, they build it when it's still not holy, and then they make it holy. It doesn't answer the question. That's why you need a maike. Even according to the Rambam, it says that the reason why a shul is potter because it's not a beis dira. The Beis Hamikdash that was built even before it became holy was also not a beis dira. Even though they built it b'chayil, but you're building it in order to make it into a Beis Hamikdash. Is mistaver, it makes sense. That they did not use it. And the Rebbe says not only maybe they didn't use it, Why would they use it if it's something that's going to become a Beis Hamikdash? Or the Matonik Mishtamas, it's even possible that because they know it's going to turn into a Beis Hamikdash, maybe they couldn't use it. But for sure, it makes sense that they didn't use it. That they didn't use this building for simple personal things like to make it into a Beis Dira. And Bichlal, you're not allowed to, in Ha'orah 17, the Rebbe says, you're not allowed to build a house, looks like the Heichel. So L'chudas Apele, if they built it before it became a Beis Hamikdash, you're not allowed to build something that in the shape of the Beis Hamikdash. Is that similar that if you build a Beis Hamikdash, even though it's not holy yet, it has a gather of Mikdash that you're allowed to build. So if it has a gather of Mikdash, for sure, people did not use it for a Dira. So even if you're going to say the reason why it's Chayev because it's not holy yet, so it could be used for a Dira, different than the Shul, which cannot be used for a Dira, the Beis Hamikdash, when it was built, B'chayil was also not able to be used for Dira. So that's one Shaila, besides the first Shaila that doesn't fit to what the Lashon of the Hagachover, but Nisvaret is not understood. The Svaret of saying that the reason that there's a difference between the Shul and Beis Hamikdash, because the Beis Hamikdash is in Chayil, and Shul is not a Beis Dira. This is also not a Beis Dira. And the second thing, Abayis HaMechuyev b'Maike, if it's a house that Abba get in Maike, what happens if you have a house and it's Chai b'Maike? And then you decide you turn it into a Shul, or another thing, Bayis HaPoter b'Maike, any other type of house that's poter from the Maike. That the Meila Botel Chiv HaMitzvah the Maike. The mitzvah of Maike goes away. The Pashtas. The Ragachover Svara is that since they built the Beis Hamikdash b'Chayil, and at that point it wasn't holy yet, the Meila they needed a Maike. That's why the Beis Hamikdash continues needing a Maike. Why? For instance, if you have a house which Chai b'Maike and then you change it into a shul, is the din that now it's still Chai b'Maike? Who cares that this building started off that it was Chai b'Maike, but now it's potter for Maike, so it's still potter. And the Rebbe says in Orah 18, because the Beptur Beis HaKnesset, we see that when we say a shul is potter for Maike, ain't nai bezet shorich liyas nivne b'tchelos l'Shem. There's no condition, no din that when is a shul chayev potter for Maike if it was built v'chatchila for a shul. But if it was built v'chatchila for a house and it was chayev b'Maike, so now when it's a shul, you become still chayev. You still continue to be chayev. There's no such din. There's no din that you only build it only if you built it l'chatchila l'Shem zeh for a shul. And not if you bought it for a house and it's chai b'Maike, then when it becomes a shul, it's still chai b'Maike. No such thing. It's still potter. We see that. We see people take houses and they turn to shuls. And the din is that while it was a house, it was chai b'Maike, and that same building now became a shul. It's potter for Maike. For other reasons, it became now something potter. It still continued. It's potter even though it started. So what does Raka Chaver say? The teretz that since it was built b'chayil and b'chayil, it's not a beis dira. It could be a beis dira, and b'meile, that's why it was already chayiv. So later on, when it became holy, it's still chayiv. Where do we see such a thing? That if it's originally chayiv and later became potter, the chayiv still stays. There's no such pshat. So we're back to the question: why is the Beis Hamikdash chayiv b'Maike if the shul, Beis HaKnesset, Beis Medrash is potter? The Shleimer Rabbi said the pshat could be like this: Rasha in Chum is masbir. As we said before, that the fact that the shul and the yeshiva are not included in the posek gagecha, it says you shall make a maike ligagecha to your roof, and this is not included. Why? So Rasha says is while ein chelik lechet mehem bay, because there's nobody, not one has a share in it, because because it also belongs to people far away, over Layom, outside, across the ocean. In other words, a shul in every city belongs to the whole world. All the Yidden in the world have a connection to the shul. So Rasha says that's why it's not called gagecho. It's not yours, because there are so many other people there. Now, what does Rasha mean with it? So Rebbe explains the mitzvah warned Rasha by saying this, and we'll see what he means. Rasha is trying to tell us to answer a question. Why is a shul different than a house of partners? The din is that if you have a house that belongs to partners, to more than one person, it still has to have a maike. The Gemara says, from word gagecha is mashme the doch and the shutves leif. From the word gagecha, if you look, make a Maike to your roof, and Loshen Yochid, which is singular, doesn't say Gagechem, Gagecha, your roof, singular. So it's mashma that only if it belongs to one person. But if it belongs to more than one person, there's no din Maike. That's what it seems like. So the Gemara says no. For that thing still, the Balder Posik touched them time for Maike. Since the Posik tells us the reason why we need this fence, because the Posik says Kihipel and Nefel Mena, the faller might fall, means someone might fall down. And since this is the reason, there is no difference whether it belongs to one person or belongs to partners. Therefore, a house that belongs to partners is obligated to have a mic. Like the Rambam says, he says, that the whole din of mic depends only on the fact that someone might fall. So who cares who owns it? So if that's the reason why Bayis shall shoot him, is chayiv b'maike, wird doch lefi se kosher, so the kasher mit wo seinen anders, what the Knesius and what the Droshes, was wenn jenes meid from Wort Gagecha. So why shulen and yeshivas are exempt from it? Because the posuk excludes it. When it says, the Gemara says, since it says Gagecha, your roof, so not the roof of a shul. But we see by Shutfin, we say, even though it's also not Gagecha, nevertheless you're chayiv because someone might fall. So why by a shul don't we say the same thing? Afilas asnit gagecha, even though a shul is not gagecha, don't we have to make sure that this doesn't happen, that the person might fall? So the chura shul should be like a bayis shel shutfim, a house of partners. So Rashi comes to answer that. As a botek nesis, and the reason why you put it, there's a problem that someone might fall. But what the Torah does, the Torah is obligate somebody to make the maikeh. There's nobody to obligate here. In other words, there's need an owner to do it. There are two owners. Fine. Here there is no owner, and it explains why. The chiva maikeh is if the bailam from the bayis. The obligation of making this maikeh is on the owner of the house. And if it's a house belonging to partners, is there chiv maikeh? If you had the knowledge shutvim. So this obligation of maikeh is on both of them, and the Rebbe uses both terms, and each one of the two. Or he uses the lotion of all of the two, which would there's a lot to it in these two words. Does each one have his own obligation, or the two together have the obligation? So whichever way, but there is somebody to be mechayiv, somebody to obligate. But the people of the city that build the shul or the yeshiva, we can't pinpoint on each one that this guy is the owner, has a share in ownership. By Shutfin, we know exactly who they are, and they both chayiv. And here there is no such thing. Vile, af libnei ever hayomus. So like Rasha said, because it also belongs to people far away. You can't obligate people who live 1,000 miles away to make a maikeh. And since they are also part of the ownership of the shul, the mele, you can't be mechayev them. So if you can't be mechayev them, you can't be mechayev. And the Rebbe in the order 21 adds, he tries some avodah here. Okay, so those who are far, you can't be mechayev. Really, everyone should be mechayev, but they're far. You can't tell them make a maikeh. They don't live here. So tell the people who do live here. So the Rebbe adds here, since there are others, and we don't know that each one has a share, and some of them are not shaykh to be chayev b'maikeh, so and no one knows exactly which part is his share. So since it's no one has a clear share, so there's nobody clearly able to be chayev. Or another reason, because if so many people own it, so the shul has a certain value. If you divide it amongst all the people, all the Yidden in the world, no one has a chelik, a share, which is worth one prute. Because if you have millions of people and the house is worth $10,000, no one is that prute. And if you're not of a prute, you're not a bailam, so you're not chayiv. But made by other reasons. But this is the point that the Rebbe makes here, that by a shul you're poted according to Rasha, because it belongs to everybody. The mele you can't be mechayev anybody, because it belongs to people who are far away. So the people here, you can be mechayev. Okay. Now, it comes out from here that you don't consider the people from the city that build the shul, that they are the owners. That's what we're saying. From them was megifin, but there's a contradiction. The Rebbe says it's not a contradiction. To what? We find as lagaba andere dinim werden die bnei Yiriyah verrechnet wie die beiden von der Beis HaKnesses. Lagaba other dinim, we do find that the people from the city are considered the owners of the shul. And in order to the Rebbe says, the goyim, if it's a shul that has someone living there, then mezuzah we consider the people the owners, and by din of negoyim, whichever other din we do find. And here we're saying that there's nobody who could be considered an owner in order to be mechayim and maike. So there is no contradiction. By lagabat mchiv maike is negeya, because when it comes to the obligation of maike is negeya, need nor der kinyan aguf bisek. It's not only if you're an owner of the shul or not, was gehed places of here which belongs only to the people of the city. Norechadas is zainer amokim loder. It's a place where he lives in. So by lagabat other dinim, since it's a place to live in, you mechayev you. Lagabat other dinim. Schenken beis hakneses v'kol Yisrael hom recht zu reingehen und mishtamer sein. Mit jedem beis hakneses b'chol yorah shebe'elam. Since by a shul, every yid has a right to go in and use every shul in the world. Ubeloshen von Ragachover, the Loshen Ragachover, but Maike totally bedire. By Maike, it's negeya l'dire. So I don't know if I explained myself before properly. By Maike, it's negeya to if you live there. People from far don't live there. Dires beis hakneses shaykh lekel. The beis hakneses, living in the shul, everybody could live. So you can't pinpoint that these people are the ones that have an obligation to live. But the Vaile, it's not so 100% clear, but it seems like what the Rebbe is explaining, that what is the reason why shul doesn't need a maike, because the shul belongs to everybody, people who are far away. And mainly you cannot pinpoint who is the owner of the shul, and if you don't have the pinpoint an owner, since it belongs to everybody and people who are far away, they can't do it, so you can't pinpoint. So, and it's a mokim loder, it's a place to live, and everybody could live. So everybody is, so to speak, the bailam, and you can't know who it is, like the Rebbe said in the order, because it's not clear, because you don't know which part he has or how much value he has in the shul. But Mele, there is nobody to be mechayev. Not that there's a place that doesn't need, but it would need a maike, because who cares? It's a shul. People might fall off. True. But on the other hand, you have to be mechayev somebody, and there's nobody you could pinpoint who to be mechayev. That's what the Rebbe learns from Shat Rasha. If that's the reason, the Rebbe is going to explain now why there's a difference between the shul and the Beis Hamikdash. Now we'll understand why the Heichel, the building of the Beis Hamikdash, is obligated with a Maike. What the Rebbe is going to try to say here is that by the Beis Hamikdash, yes, everybody is an owner. So you mechayev everybody, different than the shul, and explain why. In the Mikdash, Amali Yidin got a chelik. In the Beis Hamikdash, everyone had a chelik. And shutfas, it was like shutfas. Every yid participated. Sign the Mokim Hamikdash was David the Melech Lekef Narabna Yevusim. Part in the place where the Beis Hamikdash stood, which David the Melech bought from Arabna Yevusi. Mit Geld was genommen von alle Shvatim, with the money he collected from all the Yidden from all the Shvatim. That's the place. Al der the Mikdash Gufe werd gebaut von Nitves Hatzibur. When they built the Beis Hamikdash, it was donations from the community. So everyone participated. Punkt wie alle Yidden haben sich bestätigt mit Nitves HaMishkan, just like we see by the Mishkan, all the Yidden participated, gave money, gave donations. Is mistaber, makes sense. As alle Yidden haben sich bestätigt gewesen in der Kuppe von Dishke von welchem gebaut oder Bedek Beis Hamikdash. So it makes sense that when they built the Beis Hamikdash, everyone participated. So everyone has a share in the Beis Hamikdash, or in Bedek Beis. When you fix the Beis Hamikdash, everyone has a share. So, but mainly, if everyone has a share, so there is owners that you could pinpoint. Every Yid in the world is an owner. So you could be mechayev to make a maike. And complete, the Rebbe continues. When Alpha Pia B'Shaz the Yochid Gid Zayin Nedovi in der Kuppe, even though the din is that if an individual gives his donation to the fund of the Beis Hamikdash, he says, "Be'efim von Yemosron letzibur yofe yofe." He has to give it away completely. In other words, he gives up his individual connection to it, and he gives it to the fund, to the general fund of the tzibur. Nicht wie Mammon was gehört zu kam Yechidim to shoot. It's just not like money that are owned by, which is owned by partners. When you own by partners, each one has the ownership. When you give away a donation for Beis Hamikdash, you basically seemingly lose your ownership completely. It's not so true. Von deswegen wird durch dem nicht nisbatle gamme der Chel Kayochid. Even when you give it away, the fact that you are who you are, you gave the money, is not completely bottled. Ki do der I have them from Bakoshas Meisha Bekesher to Kerach Badose. They have the proof when Meisha Rabbein asked, when there was the story with Kerach fighting against Meisha. So Meisha said to the Eibishter, please don't accept the share of the Karbonas from Korach and his people. And Rasha says, what did he mean? Chelkom b'tmidei tzibur le'yekubel. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I know that each person has a share in the Karbonas tzibur. In the Korban Tamid, every day they bought a Korban, which is for the whole tzibur, a Korban Tamid. And it came with money from all the Yidden, so every Yid is a share. So, and Mele, when the Eibush accepts the Korban, he accepts the share of every Yid. So Moshe has the Eibush that the share of Korach and his people don't accept. Women don't accept it. They have no more share. Since the din is that when you give the money away, it's not yours anymore. You have no connection. Nevertheless, we see it's the tzibur, but he still have a connection, because if they would lose the connection completely, but what's Moshe saying? Don't take their share. They have no share. From that is a raya that as much as when you give away money to the Karbonis or to the Beis Hamikdash, and you give it away, and now it becomes part of the fund, of the general fund, of the tzibur, you still have a connection to it. When the far is the Mikdash al Kaponim main shutfus the Kol Yisrael. So therefore, the Beis Hamikdash is like a shutfus. All the Yidden participated in making the Beis Hamikdash, so they're all partners. And the Rebbe in Order 31 says, in the end of the order, and since all the Yidden participated in money for building the Beis Hamikdash, they have a share in the Beis Hamikdash. More than what the people have a share in the shul. It's more. Here they all participated in the building. When we say by the shul, all the Yidden in the world own the shul. Everyone could live there. But not every Yid paid for money for it. So if we're looking here, so there's more connection to every single Yid in the Beis Hamikdash, and every single Yid has a certain ownership because he paid money, while in the shul, the people who built it in the city, Take, did that. But didn't make them the only owners. All the other Yidden also owners. But they never gave money for it. So the shutfis of all the Yidden in the Beis Hamikdash is a stronger shutfis than in a shul. And since it's a stronger shutfis, it's like a house that's from shutfim, a house of partners, that there is owners, even though it's more than one, that they are obligated. So that's why in the Beis Hamikdash they're also obligated. Let's go back to the Pnim. And since every Yid has a share in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Korban Tamid, every Yid has a share. That's why Moshe was able to say, please don't accept their share, because the share is there. So too, for sure, they had a share in the Beis Hamikdash. So when they built the Beis Hamikdash, they were Mischayev b'Maike, because they're Shutfim, and Shutfim are Chayev b'Maike. In other words, the Beis Hamikdash is more like a building of Shutfim. It's not Gagecho, but it's not your roof of one person, it's a roof of Shutfim. That doesn't matter. So in order to be Chayev, als a roof, it doesn't have to be only yours, Mamesh one. Like we said before, a house of Shutfim is also not really Gagecha, the Gemara says. Nevertheless, it's Chayva Mike. You have to make sure that no one should fall. Same thing by the Beis Hamikdash. Since all the Yidden are Shutfim, and if they're partners, the din is Vaish Shutfim is Chayva Mike. The Beis Hamikdash is a house of Shutfim in Chayva Mike. And Order 33, the Rebbe adds, Masha'en kim bebeis hakneses, but in a shul, shalei nivna mekum v'sibur kol Yisrael. There, it wasn't built from the fund of all the Yidden, that all the Yidden participated. Ein lechayev rak bnei ha'ir bin shayach kol Yisrael. So they are not chayev. Now, let's be mechayev the people who live in the city, because then we could. So the Rebbe says, but because not everybody is chayiv. Not every owner is chayiv. It's a funny thing. If not every owner is chayiv, you can't be mechayiv. They're all owners. Some owners are chayiv, some are not. The ones that are far are not chayiv. The ones that are here should be chayiv, but you can't. Something belongs to all the Eden. You can't, and they're all owners, but some of them are far and not chayiv. You can't be mechayiv the other owners. So from all this, it comes out that we see the whole view, what the Rebbe is saying, that the difference between the shul and the Beis Hamikdash is shutfim. All the Yidden participated; they all gave money, and they're shutfim, and the Bayis shut mitchayev. A shul is also it has two opposites. It belongs to everybody, but not everyone can be chayev. It belongs to everybody because everybody could come and go to the shul. So all the Yidden. But there's some Yidden you can't be Mechayev. The Mele, you cannot be Mechayev even those who are there, because it's all one group. So you can't be Mechayev one owner and not for a Mele, you're not Chayev at all. Or like the Rebbe said before, that because of that since there are other people who are also owners, but they're not Chayev, you cannot know exactly which person, you can't know which part of the Beis Hamikdash, since the shul is worth so much money, and each one has a share, it's not Mavurer, it's not clear, the share even of the Bnei Hoyer. And if it's not Mavurer, not clear, you can't be Mechayev. Or because there are so many people who are Potter, and they're all owners, there is no prute for each one. So the people who are chayiv cannot be chayiv either, for the reason he said before, because there's no prute. So from all these details together, we see that the shul, there's no owner to be mechayiv. The problem is there, someone might fall, and you should need a mitzvah. But the Torah is not just saying it needs a mitzvah. Torah is mechayiv somebody. So by a shul, you can't be mechayiv everybody for all the reasons as we said before, and we have to see how we fit them all together. But all these reasons, Shenka the Beis Hamikdash is a regular shutfim. All the Yidden paid for the Beis Hamikdash, so they all have a shaykhs to it, and you could be mechayiv them because they were owned. They gave the money for the Beis Hamikdash. So when they built the Beis Hamikdash, you had to build a mitzvah. And b'meile, that's why the Beis Hamikdash is chayiv, even though the Knesset Beis Hamikdash is put. Then the Rebbe says, "Me ken noch aber fragen, but you still could ask." The Chiv Maike is dafke ba Beis Dire, weil anders is doch eine Zokuklei. By Maike, there's another din. We said before, according to Rashi, why is the shul potter? Because there's no one to be mechayev. Okay, there's no bailam, there's no owner to be mechayev. But there's another reason why a shul is potter. Because in order to be chayev Maike, it has to be a Beis Dire. It has to be a place where you live. Because if you don't live there, then you don't need a mic. The mic is only if you might go off, since you are there, and you might take a walk there while you're there, you might fall off. But if you don't live there, not a base there, you're potter. This is because that's another reason why a shul is potter, because it's not a base there. Base Knesset ain't a base there. A shul is not a base there. Rambam was bring Nordem Tam, according to the Rambam. See, like this, we're saying there are two reasons. The Rambam reads only this reason. The fish like we said before, he says it's not a dira. So if there's another condition, so to speak, when are you chayiv a maike? If it's a base dira, so what's the answer we gave before? We gave the answer before. Why is it chayiv maike? It's a bayishal shutvim. It's like a bayishal shutvim. And if it's a bayishal shutvim, you're chayiv. Not like the Beis Knesset, which is not considered bayishal shutvim, whichever way I explain it. But there's another condition. It has to be a base dira. Und der Heichel, nicht a Beis Dire. No one lived in the Heichel. No one lived in the building of the Beis Hamikdash. There's no Beis Dire. If there's no Beis Dire, it should be potter for that reason. So the whole thing we said before, there is who to be mechayev. If it's chayev and maike, a shul, there is nobody to be mechayev, so you can be mechayev. If it's a mikdash, there's shutfim, so you could be mechayev. But it should be potter for a different reason, because it's not a Beis Dire. So the Rebbe answers, you could say, the Rinyan Adir is verbunden with Achila. We know what is called a place you live, connected to where you eat. With the din by sukkah, we have a din by sukkah. Was Darvas and Teshuv came to Duru. It says you have to live in the sukkah, and the lotion is came to Duru like a dira. In other words, the sukkah becomes your dira, your dwelling place. And that din it says as Iker mitzvah yishiv b'sukkah is the Achila b'sukkah. The main mitzvah is when you eat. That's why you make a bracha leisha b'sukkah only when you eat. Because what makes something a dira? It's a place where you eat. Question is now, let's apply it to the Beis Hamikdash. Were you allowed to eat in the Beis Hamikdash? When the far is Migdash, a base dira, so the Beis Hamikdash is a base dira, a place where you live. That's the place where you have to eat kochim. We know that kochim, certain kochim, you couldn't eat anywhere else but inside the campus of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, kochim is nor bazor and eaten heichal. Even though you're allowed to eat kochim only in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, but not in the building. The Maike was on the building, on the roof of the building. So how do we say that the building is called a Beis Dire because you eat kochim there, but that wasn't in the building? But the din is not like it. As memeg, that you're allowed to, the word is going to be you're allowed to eat kochim inside the heichol. The yiseirim is there. Men darf memuz b'shas tatchak esen kochim heichol. The din is like this. You have to eat kochim kadoshim. There's two levels of kochim. Kochim kalim, kochim kadoshim. Kochim kalim you could eat in the whole city of Yerushalayim. Kodesh Kadoshim you have to eat only in this Beis Hamikdash. But normally you have to eat it in the Azorah, not in the building. But the din is that b'shas adchak, let's say there was no place or there was not possible, you could eat it inside the heichal. And not only you could eat it inside the heichal, if it's a case where you couldn't eat it in the Azorah, which mainly you're allowed to eat in the heichal, you have to eat it in the heichal. Because Kodesh Kadoshim has to be eaten. If not, it's nicer, so you have to eat it. And since the din is that you b'diavad allowed to eat it in the heichal, if you have no choice, you must eat in the heichal. So we see that the heichal is also a place where sometimes you eat and sometimes you even must eat. But then you could ask a question: if that's the reason, in the shul is the same thing. The shul we said is not called a beis dire, but there's a din that you're allowed to eat in the shul. See, kasha each from them was b'shas achak. Make talmud chacham es neichem b'sakneses v'kolish can b'samedrash. Kurik that's a kasha, and the Rebbe said it's not a kasha. That if we're saying the Beis Hamikdash, the heichal, is called the beis dire because b'shas adchak you're allowed to eat kochim there. Why is the shul not called the beis dire? Because you're not allowed to eat there. But the Talmud Chochem is allowed to eat there b'shas adchak if he has no choice in the Beis Hakneses and certainly in the Beis Hamedrash. Or Nafa became when you talk from beis dire canal. Still a shul Beis Hamedrash is not called the beis dire. So he says no problem. Weil dorten is der hetem mit zadem was azach yila v'shin tishtiye v'shin is ader acharei. Not because you're allowed to eat there. Because anytime you're going to eat in the shul, it's not really a permanent thing. It's not kovua. It's like a snack. So it's not the real achila. That's the reason you're allowed to. Because you're not allowed to eat in the shul. But in this case, you're allowed to because it's not really called eating. The Farhei says nita beis dire. If nischayev and b'maikit, that's why it's not called a beis dire, place of living, that you should be obligated to make a maikit. Else it's not al derech adira sarai. It's only like a temporary dwelling. Like a sukkah is called a temporary dwelling. Or their bais b'chutz, it brings a din arai from a sukkah. But it's not like a sukkah is called. I take that back. Not like a sukkah. It means it's called a diras arai, that in a sukkah you're allowed to eat a diras arai. No. Achilas arai, you're allowed to eat achilas arai in a sukkah. You're allowed to eat achilas arai in a sukkah. Because you're not allowed to eat chutz l'sukkah, you must eat in the sukkah. If it's kovua. But if it's an achilas arai, you could eat chutz l'sukkah. That's not a stira to the dire. That's because eating achilas arai is not against the place where you have to live in the sukkah, but you can eat achilas arai outside. That's the reason you're allowed to eat in the shul, because it's achilas arai. Or the bais b'chutzlor is pochas melamed yem because it's poter memzuzah. Like we have a din that a house outside Eretz Yisrael that you rented and you're living there less than 30 days, you don't have to make a mezuzah. Why? Because it's not called your house. Because it's only an arai. To live in chutzlor, it's less than 30 days is arai, so it's poter for mezuzah. So that's been the gay eating in a shul that you're allowed to eat v'shas adchak. It's achilas arai. So it's still not called a beis dire because that's not called kavua. Shenk and achilas kodesh kadoshim, but when you're eating korbanos kodesh kadoshim, what the achila is a mitzvah. Eating the kodesh is a mitzvah. What's mitzvah say achshavei? We know whenever something is a mitzvah, it becomes choshev. The mitzvah makes it choshev. That's what the Gemara says in Brochas. Especially it says when you eat korbanos, it says you should eat lemoshcha. The meat from the korbanos has to be lemoshcha. Lemoshcha means it has to be eaten gishmak. It has to be the gdula. You have to eat it to mustard. You have to eat it very. It should taste good. So we make that eating a choshev ezach. Is the sayin shel kviyas. So eating kochim that you might b'shas adchak eat in the heichol is called a kviyas. Since the Torah was the one that commanded you to eat it in the heichol, at least in Shas Adchak, is a beis dire. It's called a beis dire. So mainly the problem of not being a beis dire is not there, so it is a beis dire. The other problem that we have by a shul is that it doesn't have a bailam to be mechayev. The Beis Hamikdash does have a bailam to be mechayev because everyone participated in the Beis Hamikdash, so everyone has a share. Everyone has a share in the shul. Also, it's a different type of share, like we said before, for whatever the reasons that I gave before. It's not that since it belongs to people far away and they never paid for it, so they're owners, but not in a way that they can mechayev them b'maike. So a shul is potter for maike, and the Beis Hamikdash is chayev b'maike. The bir achilek zwischen Beis Hamikdash chulu and the Beis Hakneses chulu and Beis Hamikdash the kabechiv maike b'pnimis yonim. This was poshed up alocha. The Rebbe want to answer the kasha the stira, but now he's going to explain this difference that we make between the shul and the Beis Hamikdash. The gabe that the shul is potter for maike, and the Beis Hamikdash is chayev b'maike b'pnimis yonim going up Chassidus. But sei verstanden with the beer in the Maike bei Veda Ruchnis. We understood, first explaining what's the concept of a Maike. What's the Ruchnis Dike in Aveda in the Maike? So I said like this. The Pirish Pnimi is in Vasisa Maike like Agecha. This the deeper pshat, the Chassidish pshat. And when the Pasuk says you shall make a fence to your roof, and the Pasuk continues, Ki Yipel and Neifel Amanda, because the faller might fall, person might fall. Is the deeper meaning is Gagecha, Vaistav Hagbo of a Gaiva. Gagecha, your roof. Roof is all the way on top. It represents a person's Gaiva, a person's arrogance, a person being elevated, holding himself high. Vasisa Maike like Gagecha. So the roof is Gaiva, shows Gaiva. When it says you have to make a fence to your roof, main, that you have to limit your gaiva. You have to close up your gaiva. In other words, don't let your gaiva go loose, open. And he calls this from the Shalom, from the Ratei of the Magid. That's what he teaches. And the Posik says, according to this shot, you have to make a fence, limit your roof, a fence to your roof, that your roof, which is gaiva, should not go too far. And the reason is because the faller might fall, meaning because gaiva is the root of all descent in ruchnis. A person who lowers his level in ruchnis all stems from gaiva. It's known that all the evil midas of a person, the evil attributes of a person, comes from yeshus, from arrogance, and from his Yeshus is holding himself out of Metzias. In the order of 53, the Rebbe says it's all explained in the Memorim about Amalek. It says, of Amalek, Reishis gave Amalek, the beginning of all nations is Amalek. He's the top, the source of all nations. And it says in Chassidus, all the nations represent different bad midas, bad attributes. Amalek represents the bad attribute of Gaiva. And the Pasuk says, Reishis gave Amalek. The beginning of all the bad attributes which the other nations represent all come from Amalek, which is Yeshus and Gaiva. Ken Meinen, so the Rebbe says, now that we're talking about that you have to limit your Gaiva, so one might think that this union that you have to limit your Gaiva is only when we're talking about a house that's not holy, a house, a secular house. Gag, the roof of that house, which means what's the roof? The Gavos, the Gaiva, your arrogance and your Gaiva is Poshta Gaiva. It's a regular house, which means it represents regular things, and you're a Poshta person, and you have Gaiva, which is Hepech HaKdusha, the opposite of Kedusha. That's where you have to make sure that you don't limit your Gaiva. Don't let your Gaiva go out of control and do who knows what to do. That's what I might think. When we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash, was Kuli Kodesh, which is completely holy. So even the Gag, the roof of the Mikdash, which represents Gaiva, is also a holy type of Gaiva. Like it says, as person could have, his heart could be elevated, which means he has like Gaiva in the service of Hashem. And we know that it says sometimes you have Gaiva to serve Hashem. You don't do an Aveda because you're Bal Gaiva. You say, I'm not gonna do an Aveda. You know who I am? I'm so great. I'm not going to do Aveda. So that's a good Gaiva, so to speak. Chazal say, Talmud Chacham Talmud Chacham has to have a certain level of Gaiva. The eighth of an eighth, that's a very, very small measurement of Gaiva. So there is a Gaiva of Kedusha. So if a person's Gaiva is Kedusha, was darfan doba vorenen? Why do we have to stop that? Why do you have to limit that? So we're saying that even the Beis Hamikdash needs a Maike. The Beis Hamikdash represents the roof of the Beis Hamikdash represents the roof, the top, the Gaiva connected to holiness, and we're saying you still have to make a Maike. What do I have to make a Maike for? Maybe if it's regular Gaiva is no good. But if it's holy Gaiva, so to speak, why do we have to make sure that we have to put a limit to it? Is the Yerod. That's the lesson we have from here. As I feel that the Gag Hamikdash, even the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, needs the fence to limit it. Not only that, in Mikdash Gufe is the Maike given from Gag Hechol. In the Beis Hamikdash Gufe, it was on top of the building. It wasn't like the outside in the Azora there was a Maike. It was over the building. And when it means over the building, the building included the Kedesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. And the fence was around the whole building, over the roof of all three compartments, of all three rooms, the Ulam, the Heichal, and the Kedesh HaKadoshim. So even somebody over the Kedesh HaKadoshim, what could get holier than that? You still need a Maike. For Mafila, This shows that even if a person is the highest level, very well elevated, you always have to have bittul. You always have to be limited. You have to be fenced in. Your Metzias has to be fenced in with bittul, and not to have gaive. To realize that the gaive, you got to be very careful. The other, on the contrary, there's a lotion in a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Kelim hanigmorim betara tzrichem tefillah lekedesh," which means if they're kelim, which were finished, which were made, and it was toyer, but when it comes to use the same kelim for kedesh, there's different levels. There's a level of kedesh and truma that when it comes to kedesh, it still needs to be toiveled again. And the Rebbe in Chassidus teaches the word a different pshat a little bit. If kelim are finished betare, then you need tefillah for kedesh, which means afila b'shas behal by a darge was gitan or tzumein mishnah fartike kele kelim anigborim. You feel like you're a finished kele. You're great. And what kind of way are you finished kele? What a finished kele? You're great. Azabas is nigborim betare. With tar, with cleanliness, with kedusha. You're finished, you're a kele, a complete kele, you're on the high madrege. Darf man dan erst haben tefillah. If you're finished, you feel yourself that you're finished, it says it needs tefillah lekedesh, and tefillah, the word tefillah, which is immersing b'tovel, is AC as bittel. The same letters as bittel. You are, it's other Rabbi Rebbe says, not only do you also need, but it's the contrary. If you feel yourself, you're tired, that you finished, you might think, so what has to happen? Esh, Tartman Esh, then you first need Tefillah says Bittul L'Kodesh. And in Order 58, the Rebbe says, it says in Torah Eir, that Shmini Shebishmini is that the eighth of an eighth, the little bit of gaiva that the Talmud Chacham has to have, is only in the beginning. In other words, it's not that's how his Seder Aveda should always be. But then you have to have real people. That's what we're saying. You're a finished Kela, you're finished Batara, your finished Kela represents, you're complete, you're good. Nevertheless, you have to have the AC Tefillah, AC is Bittul. And the only difference the Rebbe says in the Oretz is that it's the same letters, Tefillah and Bittul is, but the difference is the Vav and the Hey. Bittul is Beis Yud Tes Vav Lamed, and Tefillah is the same letters, but instead of a Vav, it's a Yud. Tes Beis Yud Lamed Hey. So L'Kodesh, you got to go to even that. You have to go, in order to go higher, you have to have Bittul. So B'meila here also, a person who has Gaiva, and he has like a Gaiva which is good, and still, and you're a great person, you still got to be careful with your Gaiva, and you got to limit it, you got to make a fence around it. Then the Rebbe adds another point here. Till now we were saying for himself, a person in his Aveda, you have to remember that as great as you are, Gaiva is no good. And even if the Gaiva is good, but you got to limit it, you got to realize that this could lead you to who knows what. Now the Rebbe is going to say it's not only negated to you, it's negated to your affecting others. And he says like this, Maike kepshuti doch nicht verhitten sich. When the simple pshat of a Maike is not to save yourself, protect yourself. Nor bieke zu bewahren, as a zweiter soll nicht fallen von der It's to make sure that somebody else doesn't fall. The same thing when we said before what Maike means beruchnius. The Maike legagecho, the fact that you have to limit your gaive, which is the Maike to your roof, is in Yonah nicht nur zu hitten sich allein von an viele ruchnis. It's not only protect yourself from falling, which means to come down. If you have gaive, you might lower yourself, descend in your ruchnisdike status. Nor echt zu bat zweiten Yiden. You got to limit your gaive because it could affect another Yid. As gagecho, dein gavus v'gaive, your roof, meaning your gaive, so mit Geirem sein on the fila ruchnis bat zweiten shouldn't cause that somebody else should fall, descent in ruchnis. And you explain what he means. Someone is involved in spreading Yiddishkeit and Mekarev Yidden to Hashem, to the our Father in heaven. But das is echt nichlal in Kisivne Bais Chodesh lit Pnimis. And when it says you build a new house, it includes the fact that you have to be Mekarev other Yidden. As a Yid soll sich nicht bei Genugenen mit Aveda Sasme, the posse you shall build Kisivne, you shall build a new house, meaning you shouldn't be satisfied with your own Aveda. Or a darf aufbauen abayis lashem. You have to build a house to who? A house to Deibishter. Aufstellen der ganzen schlimmes dicken Bayis. You have to set up and build a complete house. You have to build a house means you have to build an environment that should be permeated with Yiddishkeit, with holiness. Und der Bai hat der Gaive. And if he does that, and at the same time he has Gaive, that's the Gagecha, he builds this thing, but at the same time, he builds it, but he has Gaive. He's nicht nur a chesed in seiner Aveda Protis. It's not only that he is lacking in his personal Aveda, but es kann gehen sein in der Fille beim Zweiten, wenn man that Mashpia sein. This could cause that the second person who you're trying to be Mashpia, who you have to be Mashpia, he should fall. Why? The Shas says Mashpia of them Zulas, because if you influence somebody else with words that come from your heart, on keine eigene peace, without your own needs, your own feelings, without your own agenda, yourself, you're not involved. You're only doing it because that's what David wants you to do. We're guaranteed that what you said will enter into God's heart. There's a lotion. Words that come out of the heart come into the heart. So if it comes from your heart, not from your yeshes, your guy, if it comes from your pure heart, it'll come into the person's heart and it'll do what it's supposed to do. But if in your words, when you're trying to mashpi on somebody else, you have gaiva in it, besides the fact that this is going to interfere with your ability to influence the other person. So, because the person will feel that you don't really mean it, you're doing it for your own ego. So you will not be mashpia on him. Besides that, he says, it could cause the opposite. The gaive in seiner Reit kann noch merachak sein dem Shemei. If the person sees gaive in your words, not only it won't affect him for the better, it could turn him around and make it even worse for him. He will see, that these people that care for themselves, and so you have to be very careful. Not only that the gaive, you have to be careful for yourself. It shouldn't lower you. You could affect on somebody else and lower somebody else. But the Rebbe is going to bavor now that you might taina. What's Nageya? What I'm saying, the words that I'm talking to him are good words. The reason if I have guy he won't take it in the right way, it's his problem. In other words, it's because he's a person that doesn't see the truth. Because if you see the truth, look into what I'm saying. What do you care if I'm about Gaiva? So the Rebbe says not like that. The 8 says bavor, the posik tells us something else. Ki yipol hanefel memena. It says the lotion in the posik is make on your roof, you should make a fence. And it means the person shouldn't fall, but it doesn't say ki yipol ha'odam, person might fall. Ki yipol ha'neifel amenu. The faller might fall. What does that mean? So the Chazal say, Kapirish Chazal say, for sure, the guy, if someone will fall, he deserves to fall. From the beginning of creation, David did that he will fall. But David brings a good thing through a good person and a bad thing through a bad person. You don't be the one to cause that to happen, even though he's a faller already. That's what the pasuk says. The faller might fall. The one that falls is a faller anyway, but you shouldn't be the one to cause it. That's the push-up shot. So the Rebbe applies it here also in the Ruchnitz. A person could say, "I didn't feel it from Zweiten is nicht schuld." We're saying, be careful, don't have gaive, because you might cause that other person who you will be mashpia might fall. So a person could say, it's not my fault. Like the Boshep Shad, he's worthy of falling. In other words, he's a faller already. Not only is deserving of falling, he already fell. He's a low person. Then the Zweite will give the second person would be a straight person. That he would be able to differentiate between the truth of what I'm saying. I'm saying words of Torah to him. And the yesha, the ego of the person, he will hear what I'm saying. And if he's a straight person, he will take the words I'm saying and disregard the fact that I'm yeshes. Has nothing to do. Like the Chazal tell us, the Meir that he was learning from Acher, and they asked him, how could you learn from Acher who became a Rosher? So he said, I'm taking the inside of the fruit, but the shell I'm throwing away. So the Meir was able to differentiate between the good part of him and the bad part. So we're saying the same thing. This guy, if he wouldn't be who he is, he would be able to differentiate between the words. The fact of my words, because the words are good. Elamai, I have guy, and he'll take it wrong and it won't work. It'll make him fall. That's his problem. Not his problem, his fault. Norval Yander is Shein Neifel. That's what the guy time is. He's already a Neifel. In other words, he's low. The Rebbe, when der Hert I need for Yeshes, so therefore when he sees that I'm saying it together with my Yeshes, Piltas, if you you say that'll cause him to fall more. And what is schuldig? So if that's it, why am I at fault? As I have to make sure of my gaive. So I have to limit my gaive. So somebody else who's anyway low, and because he's low, it'll affect him badly. But that's what. Why should I change? Because that's all his fault. So we tell him as nicht gucken, because Yaner is a neifel, that despite the fact, so we tell him, in spite the fact that that person is a neifel, we said he's low. Nevertheless, it's a chiyuv, an obligation of the person to make sure as fun gagecho von dein gag soll nicht herauskommen in the fila von a neifel, that it shouldn't be your gaive from your gag, your roof, which is the gaive, shouldn't cause that he should fall. And he quotes in order 66 that Rebbe says, just like the simple pshat of a fence, a maike. Even though he should have fallen anyway. The Bachai says, if he caused it to happen, he gets punished. How you could say, well, he's going to fall anyway. It's not my fault. Yeah, but you caused it. So the same thing we tell him. We tell this person that even though he's a faller and he might fall anyway, don't be the one to cause it. Du darfst nicht sein von die, was gesagt, don't be from those people where we say that they wish to make something negative to happen through somebody who's a negative person. They gave him to zweitens, they feel like you should be a cause to someone else to fall, even though without you would fall anyway. There's no excuse for that. Them can know about a taina, but still you could have a taina like this. So a person could think like this. I have a problem. I have my yeshes. And my yeshes, I'm not sure, could cause that other person on the field. So you know what? Since it's possible that my being mashpia on him will cause him to fall over because of my yeshes, so let me stay away from it. Why should I get involved? There's a base on what yeshes, since he knows he has yeshes. So why go into a doubt? Telling you have to make a maike. You have to limit your yeshes. I don't know if I'll succeed. I don't know if I'll succeed to make sure that I won't fall and he won't fall because I'll make the maike. Everything ganz nicht von ihm sich mit binyan dabei. I won't build a house, which means I won't building a house, as the Rebbe said before, make an environment of Yiddishkeit and spreading Yiddishkeit. Especially my own place, I won't worry about it, and certainly not about somebody else. I'll stay away from the whole thing. I'll stay away from the whole being Mecharav Yidin. Is der Posik Magdim und als Abroche Kisivne Bais Chodesh. The Posik starts off by saying Kisivne Bais Chodesh, and this is a broche. And the Rebbe quotes from Medrash, and Rashi brings the Medrash that this is part of the broche that the Eibishter gives, that you will be able to build a new house, which means that the Eibishter is saying you have to build a new house. Ayid Arboin Abayis Lashem. Ayid has to build a house to Hashem. To build an environment around yourself of Yiddishkeit. You can't rely on others. It has to be a new house. In other words, for you, it has to be your thing, something that's meant for now and for here. That's called new. It's for you. For every Yid, there is a part of the world that the Eibush designated. He has to elevate. He has to purify. And you have to do it. That's called you have to renew this. It's not somebody else. You have to do this. To you, it's something that you have to build a new house. It's yours. You have to make from this place of yours, you have to make a dwelling place for Hashem. You can't rely on the Aveda of the previous generations, or the Aveda of other Yidden of other Yidden in your generation. And the individual person is an obligation. So you have to build up your share that the Eibush designated for you to work with. But das is sein chidush, that's by you. That's a chidush. No one else can do it. Something other people can do is not a chidush by you. Even if you do it, it's somebody else's that you continue. But if it's spread for you, no one else to do it. Can't rely. To you, it's a new thing for you. That's what you have to do. When the treft at zweiten Yidden. So therefore, when you meet another Yid, but those goofies bashgocha protis. This is Hashgacha Pratis that you met him, but that proves that the other person's elevation, purification is your job. You have to do it. No one else. It's your shlichus. You have to do it. Eba feel that Zweiter is a neifel. And even if the first, second person that you're dealing with is a neifel, which means he already fall, he's a low level. And by emis dog, agecha, was can get him sein ateisis and feel am Zweiten. And you have your roof, which means you have your guy, which could cause even worse. So you could think to yourself that why should I try to make out of him? He anyway a low life. And I'm not sure my gaiva is going to be limited. So I have gaiva which could cause even make it worse. So stay away. So the Rebbe says you can't do this. You see, their farbas by emis do yeshes a gaiva. Think to yourself, he says, because you have yeshes and gaiva, that fell in ba zweiten, so he should be missing. By them was ein tikkun is verbunden mit him. If his fixing, so to speak, is dependent on you, so you have yeshes and gaiva, that should stop. That because of that, that person shouldn't be fixed by you. You have yeshes, and you're afraid your yeshes might make it worse. So you have two options here: or not to get involved at all, or make your maike. Limit your yeshes. Macha maike and farsamta yeshes. Make this maike and fence in your yeshes, your gaive. You're not free to become bottle from it. Because it's your yeshes. Because of that, you shouldn't help another yid. It's not your business. You have to work on yourself. Try to take away your gaive, but that's not a reason to stop chas v'sholom. If you do the sipur for chassidim b'shem for Mittel Rebbe, like the famous story that chassidim tell in the name of the Mittel Rebbe. He tells a story. The Mittel Rebbe had gemacht a takona. The Mittel Rebbe made a takona. The chassidim was flagging kumek and the babich. The those chassidim that came to the babich to the Rebbe. So if they weg zurück, ahim chazen chassidus in the Städtler was again provided. On the way home, the cities that they pass, they should say chassidus, chazer over the chassidus. Atener in gemana chosid. Was for chazen chassidus betumt am. There was a chosid, a young man, a chosid, that when he chazer chassidus, it was very good and very geschmack. Sich verklockt for the Mittel Rebbe, he complained to Mittel Rebbe. As beim Chazer Chassidus, they feel a regish gaive. That when he Chazer Chassidus, when he says of Chassidus, he feels gaive. Because he feels that he's saying it so good, and people give him obviously compliments. I think anyway he feels. So he thought maybe I should stop Chazer Chassidus because in my Aveda it's ruining me. Hat him the Mittel Rebbe began to Mittel Rebbe answered him, from the Werden of Chassidus als Chazer. An onion should become of you, but you should Chazer Chassidus. Now the Poshup Pshat is it's an expression by Yidden. That you say something, don't worry what's going to happen to you. But the Rebbe is medayik in every word of the Rabbeim. So he says, at Sibele, it's bitter. An onion is bitter. But it makes the food better. So now forget about that, it's no good for you. Because it brings you yeshes. You got a chazer chassidus because it's going to accomplish. Now we'll understand also Al Pichsidis, Al Pida Veda of the Maike, the difference between a shul that doesn't need a Maike and a Bisamigish needs a Maike. The Rinyan from Bisaknes is a Bisamedesh is Avedes Hatfile Velimed Atera. The Rinyan of a shul, Bisamedesh, is davening and Limed Atera and learning Torah. But also that way the Ruchnis from the mention in sich und mitzvah. That's the personal Aveda that the person has. He has to do mitzvahs, he has to learn Torah, he has to daven, etc., etc. Mashenken Beis Hamikdash direkt to his klolos Aveda. So the Beis Hamikdash is not specifically tefillah or specifically learning. It's the general Aveda. Nicht nur the Aveda mit sich. It doesn't include only what the person has to work with himself, but also Va'adarab on the contrary, mainly the Aveda from Dir B'Tachtenim. The Beis Hamikdash represents the Aveda of bringing down the Eibishter into this world, making a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. So, machen von den Yonim Gashmim und Welt Bechlal, Adir Isbarach, to make from the physical things and from the world Bechlal a Dir for Hashem. The Beis Hamikdash represents Dir B'Tachtenim. But the far is eine von the Avedas Ikris and Migdash, the Avedas HaKabonis. That's one of the main Avedas in the Beis Hamikdash, the Avedas HaKabonis. And the Rebbe says in order 71 that the Rambam even says, what's the reason for the mitzvah of making a Beis Hamikdash is in order to have a place to bring Karbonis. So the ikar of the Mikdash is karbonis. What's karbonis? Maila zayin de beheme v'chule gashmis l'Hashem, to elevate the physical animal to the Eibishter. When he's do achilas kenim v'achilas bailam, then the kenim have to eat from it, and the owner has to eat from it. But then you from aveda sabrunim, which when you eat, you're mavarer, then it's tzutzis akdusha, you elevate the food that you're so that. Inyan Beis Hamikdash represents elevating not just yourself, elevating the surrounding of you. Besides what they did there, the general concept of Beis Hamikdash is to bring hashpoah, influence, good influence on the whole outside world. But the far side, the Chalenis Hamikdash give us kufim batumim. That's why the windows of the Beis Hamikdash will build different than regular. Regular in the windows, you build it outside the window is narrow, and inside it's wide. for the light from the outside to come inside and light up the house. But the Beis Hamikdash was the opposite. Inside was narrow and outside was wide. And the reason is, so the light of inside the Beis Hamikdash should light into the outside. This would be a testimony to the whole world that the Shekhinah is Vayidin, which means it brings the light of the Shekhinah into the world. So the inyan of the Beis Hamikdash is to elevate the outside of yourself, but Bishul and then the Beis Hamikdash is your elevation of yourself. Since the main thing of the Maike is not just for yourself, mainly to make sure that somebody else who's a faller, somebody who's low, should not fall. So the inyan of the Maike has to do more with the concept of Beis Hamikdash than the concept of a shul. Since the main thing is to make sure that someone doesn't fall. Atzveiten, what is in a darge from neifel, that the another person who's in the level of a neifel shouldn't fall. And even for yourself, wenn mis mernume mit der Avede, was ist verbunden mit jedem sein von der Regel, der Regel vernehmen sich mit Birur Elam, Tivne Beis Chodesh. The mic is when you're building a house. As we said before, building a house means a house for Hashem, go out into the world and making an environment of Torah mitzvahs. So the main thing of the mic is to make sure that, side for the outside, side for yourself, when you're working with the outside, you shouldn't fall. That's why when it comes to a shul, since that represents Aveda with yourself, that's not the main thing of a Maika. The main thing of a Maika is that when you work with others and you work with people who are low and trying to bring a dira b'tachtainim, you have to have a Maika. Your guy that shouldn't interfere. But the shul doesn't represent that. The shul is for yourself. So therefore, the Maika is not so important. Schenke Beis Hamikdash with tutuf in Gashmisel, and this Mikdash which accomplishes in the physicality of the world. When in Aveda Ruchnis is the Aveda from Boina Bayis Lashem. In Ruchnis, it means that the fact that you're building a house to Hashem, machen from the Sviva Adir Elisberg, make from the environment a dwelling place to Hashem. By them, for the Maika. Here, you need to make sure that you have a Maika, because otherwise, you will not accomplish what the main thing of a Maika is, to bring godliness into the Neifel and into the Gashmis of the world. Is the Tachel Hashem is verbunden mit Beis Hamikdash Tafke. And even though the purpose of the Maike is we said before, to make sure that it doesn't fall, but still the main thing is connected to the Beis Hamikdash Tafke. The Tachel Hashem is verbunden mit Beis Hamikdash. It's not only for a regular person who helps others, and you have to have a Maike, and that's why you need it only when it's negate to others. But the Tachlis is the Beis Hamikdash Dafke. Well, it's not only the Beis Hamikdash also needs a Maike. The Beis Hamikdash is the Tachlis. But it's through the Beis Hamikdash that the whole purpose of the creation is accomplished. You build a new house. That means you make a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. And through this, we merit the building of the third Beis Hamikdash.